My family called me a thief until the bank cameras proved who really was. My family called me a thief for 3 years. 3 whole years I had to endure looks of contempt, whispers at family gatherings, and the constant weight of being treated like the black sheep who had disgraced the Thompson family name. My name is Sarah. I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the greatest betrayals. It all started when my grandmother Dorothy died in March of 2019, leaving an inheritance of $180,000 that was to be divided equally among her 5 grandchildren: me, my cousin Jessica, my cousin Michael, my sister Amanda, and my cousin David. Grandma Dorothy had always been very fair with us, always saying that each of us would get our share when the time came. She had a savings account at the First National Bank of Ohio, where she had religiously saved part of my late grandfather's pension for over 20 years. The problem began 2 weeks after the funeral. My Uncle Robert, Jessica's father, and the executor of the will, called me with a voice I had never heard before: cold, calculating, accusatory. "Sarah, we need to talk. There's something very strange going on with your grandmother's account." At the time, I was working as a marketing manager at a tech company in Columbus, earning a good living and residing in a comfortable apartment that I paid for myself. I didn't desperately need the money, but that inheritance represented security, maybe the down payment for my first home. When I arrived at Uncle Robert's house on that sunny April afternoon, I found the entire family gathered in the living room. Jessica was sitting on the sofa with an expression that said she already knew everything. Michael was flipping through some papers with a worried look. Amanda, my own sister, couldn't even look me in the eye. David was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, staring at me as if I were a dangerous stranger. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. "Sit down, Sarah," said Uncle Robert, pointing to an isolated chair as if I were a defendant in a trial. He placed a bank statement on the coffee table. "In the last 6 months before your grandmother's death, regular withdrawals were made from her account, always at the same ATM, always at the same time, always near your apartment in Columbus." I felt my stomach turn to ice. I picked up the paper with trembling hands and saw what they were seeing. Withdrawals of $500, sometimes $1,000, made every Friday at 2 in the afternoon from the ATM on Elm Street, 3 blocks from my building. "This doesn't make sense," I mumbled, feeling all those familiar faces judging me in silence. Grandma never gave me her card. How could I have made these withdrawals? Jessica let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, please, Sarah. You were the only one who visited her every weekend, the only one she trusted completely. You had 1,000 opportunities to take the card and figure out the PIN." I shot up from the chair, feeling an anger I had never experienced before. "Are you accusing me of stealing money from our grandmother, the woman who raised me after my parents died? Have you all lost your minds?" But they hadn't. They had evidence, or at least what looked like evidence. Uncle Robert had gone to the bank, spoken with the manager, and gotten all the statements. $45,000 had disappeared from the account in the last months of Grandma Dorothy's life. $45,000 that reduced the inheritance for each of us. And based on the location of the withdrawals, the frequency, the timing, everything pointed to me. It was too perfect a case, an accusation that fit like a glove, and that should have been my first warning sign. To understand how I got to that terrible moment, I need to go back in time and tell you about my relationship with the Thompson family. My parents died in a car accident when I was 8, and it was Grandma Dorothy who took me in. She lived in a cozy house in Springfield, Ohio, with a garden full of roses she cared for as if they were her children. For 10 years, she was my mother, my father, my best friend, and my biggest defender. Grandma always said I was special, that I had a heart too kind for this world. She taught me how to cook her secret recipes, took me to church every Sunday, and helped me with my homework at the kitchen table while the smell of apple pie filled the whole house. When I turned 18 and won a scholarship to Ohio State University, she cried with pride. "My girl is going to go far in life," she would tell anyone who would listen. Even after I graduated and moved to Columbus for work, I kept up the sacred ritual of visiting her every weekend. Saturday morning, I would drive the 40 minutes to Springfield, we'd have lunch together, go grocery shopping, and watch our favorite TV shows. Sunday morning, we'd go to church, then she would prepare that roasted chicken with potatoes that was the most delicious thing in the world. It was our tradition, our special time, and I wouldn't miss it for anything. During these regular visits, I noticed that Grandma was becoming more forgetful. Nothing major at first, simple things, like forgetting where she put her glasses, or repeating the same story twice in one conversation. But over time, the forgetfulness became more concerning. She started having trouble remembering numbers, passwords, important dates. One time, I found her crying in the kitchen because she couldn't remember her bank account number to pay a bill. That's when I suggested she give me power of attorney to help her with the more complicated financial matters. "Grandma, you don't need to worry about these things. Let me take care of the payments. You just worry about being happy and well." She was so relieved she cried. "My Sarah, what would I do without you? You take better care of me than my own children." And it was true. While I was there every weekend, Uncle Robert would show up once a month, always in a rush, always eager to leave. I knew Grandma's financial routine like the back of my hand. She received a $1,200 pension check every month, automatically deposited into her account at First National Bank. She spent about $800 on basic expenses, groceries, medicine, household bills. The $400 that was left over, she religiously put into her savings, saying it was to leave something for her grandchildren when she passed. By doing this for 20 years, she had saved up a small fortune. What broke my heart the most was seeing how the rest of the family treated her. My sister Amanda would call once a month, always asking for a favor or complaining about her own life. Jessica only showed up when she needed to borrow money. Michael lived in California and sent a Christmas card every year. David had drug problems, and Grandma always helped him, even though she knew the money wouldn't be used well. But I was there, every week, holding her hand when she was scared, taking her to the doctor, keeping her company on rainy Sundays. Guys, if you're listening to this story and you have a grandmother, a grandfather, someone in your family that you love, don't put off until tomorrow what you can do today. Go visit, go hug them, go spend time together. Because when that person is gone, what's left are the memories. And I can tell you that I don't regret a single weekend I spent with my Grandma Dorothy. But I can also say that I never imagined that this unconditional love I felt for her would be used against me in the cruelest way possible. If you're enjoying this story, stick with me, because what comes next will leave you outraged. After that meeting at Uncle Robert's house, my life turned into a living hell. The accusation of stealing from my own grandmother spread through the family like wildfire. Within days, I had become persona non grata at all family events. My Aunt Carol's birthday, I wasn't invited. The Memorial Day barbecue at my cousin's house, my name was crossed off the list. Jessica's son's graduation, she called me personally to uninvite me. "Sarah, I think it's best if you don't show up," Jessica said with a coldness that cut me like a blade. "It will make people uncomfortable. You understand, right? After what happened." I tried to argue, to explain that I had never touched Grandma's money, that there was some terrible mistake, but she cut me off mid-sentence. "Look, I don't want to argue about this. The facts speak for themselves. The money is gone. The withdrawals were made near your house. You were the only one with access. Do the math. The worst part was seeing how my own family had turned their backs on me without even giving me the benefit of the doubt. Amanda, my younger sister, whom I had protected my whole life, whom I had helped pay for college when she was struggling, now treated me like a dangerous criminal. "I just don't understand how you could do this," she said during a tense phone call. "Grandma trusted you more than any of us. How could you have the heart to steal from her?" "Amanda, I didn't steal anything!" I screamed into the phone, feeling tears of frustration burn my eyes. "I'm your sister. You've known me for over 30 years. How can you believe I'd be capable of something like this?" But she had already made up her mind. "Sarah, I want to believe you, I really do, but the evidence is just too clear. I need some time away from you to sort this out in my head." And she hung up. The social isolation was devastating, but it wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was when Uncle Robert decided to take the matter to the police. He scheduled a meeting at the Springfield Police Department and summoned me to attend. "If you're as innocent as you say you are, you'll have no problem talking to the detectives," he told me over the phone. "But if you confess now, maybe we can resolve this within the family without getting the law involved." At the station, I felt like a real criminal. Detective Martinez, a middle-aged man with a graying mustache and tired eyes, had me sit in a small, stuffy room. He placed the bank statement on the table between us and started asking questions that sounded like accusations. "Sarah, you visited your grandmother regularly, correct?" "Yes, I did." "You had access to her house, her personal belongings?" "Yes, I did." "She trusted you enough to give you her banking information?" "Yes, she did." Every answer I gave seemed to dig the hole I was in even deeper. The detective showed me a map of the city, marking my apartment and the ATM where the withdrawals were made. The distance was ridiculously short, just 3 blocks. "It's quite a coincidence, don't you think?" he said, drumming his fingers on the table. $45,000 withdrawn, always near your house, always on a Friday, always around the time you'd be leaving work. I had an explanation for all of it, of course. On Fridays, I left the office early to get to Grandma's house before dark. I always did some shopping on the way, always stopped at the bank to withdraw cash for the weekend's expenses. It was a routine I had kept for years, a routine that anyone who knew me well would be aware of. But now, that innocent routine was being used as evidence of my guilt. "Detective, I know how this looks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "but I swear on my grandmother's memory that I never stole a cent from her. Someone is using my routine against me, someone who knew exactly where I would be and when." He looked at me skeptically. "And who would that be? Who else had access to your grandmother's bank information? Who else would she trust enough to give her card's PIN?" It was a question I couldn't answer at the time, but today, after everything that's happened, it makes all the sense in the world. The following months were the worst of my life. The police investigation led to nothing concrete because, despite all the circumstantial evidence, there was no definitive proof that I had committed the crime. But in the court of family opinion, I had already been tried and convicted. Uncle Robert hired a lawyer and filed a civil lawsuit against me, demanding that I return the $45,000 I had allegedly stolen. "Even if the police can't prove it criminally," his lawyer said during a preliminary hearing, "the civil evidence is sufficient to establish liability." I had to hire my own lawyer, Mr. Peterson, an elderly but still sharp man who cost me $300 an hour that I didn't have. "Sarah, your case is complicated," he told me frankly. "The circumstantial evidence is very strong. Unless we find something that definitively proves your innocence, it could be difficult to win." My professional life also began to be affected. The family scandal reached the ears of my coworkers, and although no one said anything directly, I felt the stares, the whispers in the hallways, the way conversations would stop when I entered a room. My boss, Mrs. Williams, called me in for a private conversation. "Sarah, I need to ask if there's anything you'd like to tell me about your personal situation. Some rumors have reached me, and I need to know if this might affect your work here." I had to sit there and explain to my own boss that I was being falsely accused of stealing from my deceased grandmother. The humiliation was unbearable. "I understand your position," she said, trying to be diplomatic, "but you need to understand that our company has a reputation to uphold. This situation escalates. We may have to make some difficult decisions." The message was clear: resolve this quickly or you could lose your job. At home, alone in my Columbus apartment, I spent my nights awake, trying to understand how my life had unraveled so quickly. I mentally reviewed every visit to Grandma's house, every conversation we had, every moment we spent together. I tried to remember if there had been any sign, any clue I had missed. Grandma never mentioned money going missing. She never seemed worried about her finances. Until the end, she talked about leaving a nice inheritance for her grandchildren. It was during one of those sleepless nights that I had an idea. If I was truly innocent, and if someone was using my card or my identity to make the withdrawals, maybe there was evidence that no one had looked for yet. I knew that banks kept security footage from their ATM cameras, but I also knew that this footage was erased after a certain period. If I wanted any chance, I had to act fast. The next day, I went straight to the First National Bank on Elm Street, the same one where the mysterious withdrawals had been made. I spoke with the manager, a young and efficient man named James Parker. "Miss Thompson, I understand your situation," he said after I explained the case, "but the security footage is the property of the bank and can only be released with a court order or in the case of an official police investigation." "But there is a police investigation," I argued. "Detective Martinez is handling the case. Can't you release the footage to him?" James checked his computer. "Actually, the police have already requested and received the available footage, but what we have only covers the last 60 days. The older recordings have already been automatically erased by the system." My heart raced. 60 days meant that the footage of the older withdrawals, the ones dating back 6 months, no longer existed. But there was still hope. Some of the more recent withdrawals, those made in the last weeks of Grandma's life, might still be on tape. "Mr. Parker, did the police analyze this footage? Did they see who was actually making the withdrawals?" He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Miss, I can't discuss the details of an ongoing investigation. You'll need to speak with the detective in charge." I left the bank with a mix of hope and despair. If there was footage, and if it showed that it wasn't me making the withdrawals, my innocence would be proven. But if there was nothing conclusive, or if the images were poor quality, I would remain the prime suspect. It was an all-or-nothing bet, and my entire life depended on the outcome. The call that changed everything came on a rainy Tuesday in November, almost 8 months after Grandma Dorothy's death. It was Detective Martinez, and for the first time since the investigation began, his voice sounded different. No longer accusatory or suspicious, but almost excited. "Sarah, you need to come down to the station today. We have something important to show you." My heart started beating so hard I thought it would explode in my chest. I got to the station in 20 minutes, driving like a maniac through the light rain falling over Springfield. Detective Martinez was waiting for me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was a mix of relief, surprise, and something that even looked like an apology. "Sarah, have a seat. What I'm about to show you is going to change everything in this case." He turned on a computer monitor and adjusted the screen so I could see it clearly. "This is the footage from the ATM on Elm Street," he explained, clicking on a file. "The quality isn't the best, but it's good enough to see what we need to see." The black and white image showed the familiar ATM, the one where I had supposedly made dozens of fraudulent withdrawals. The timestamp showed a Friday afternoon, 2:15 p.m., exactly the time mentioned on the bank statements. And then I saw it. A figure approached the machine, inserted a card, typed in a PIN, and made a withdrawal. But it wasn't me. It was a tall man wearing a baseball cap, pulled down mow, sunglasses, and a hooded jacket. Even with the disguise, there was something familiar about his silhouette, his walk, his gestures. The detective paused the image at the moment the man slightly turned his face toward the camera. "Do you recognize this person?" My mouth went dry. My stomach churned. For a moment, I thought I was going to throw up right there in the chair. Because yes, I recognized him. Despite the cap, the glasses, the hood, I knew exactly who that person was. "It's my cousin David," I whispered, barely able to form the words. "It's David Thompson, my Uncle Robert's son." The detective nodded gravely. "That's what we thought too, but there's more." He clicked on another file, a recording from a different date. Again, the same disguised figure approached the ATM, but this time, a gust of wind caused the hood to slip back for a second, clearly revealing David's face. There was no longer any doubt. It was him who had been stealing from Grandma Dorothy's account, using some kind of cloned or duplicate card, making the withdrawals always near my apartment so the blame would fall on me. "How did he get access to your grandmother's card?" the detective asked. I closed my eyes, remembering details that now made sense. David had serious drug problems for years. He would show up at Grandma's house sporadically, always needing money, always with some desperate excuse. Grandma, with her kind heart and already failing memory, must have given him the card at some point, or he might have written down the details when she wasn't paying attention. "He knew my routine," I murmured, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place in my mind. He knew I visited Grandma every weekend, knew I always stopped at the bank on Elm Street on Fridays. He planned everything to make me the culprit. Detective Martinez placed a hand on my shoulder. "Sarah, I need to apologize to you. We followed the evidence, but that evidence was deliberately planted to frame you. You were the victim of a very elaborate setup." Tears started streaming down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of anger, of a kind of bitter triumph. After 8 months of being treated like a criminal by my own family, the truth had finally come out. "What happens now?" I asked. "David will be arrested today," the detective replied, "and all charges against you are being officially dropped. You're free, Sarah. More than that, you're vindicated." Guys, if you've been following this story from the beginning, you know the hell I've been through these past few months. You know how painful it is to be betrayed by your own family, to be accused of something you never did, to have your reputation destroyed by lies. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the truth always finds a way to come out. Always. And when it does, the feeling is indescribable. If you've also been through something similar, leave a comment below telling your story. Let's create a chain of support for those who need it. And if you want to know how my family reacted when they found out the truth, stay with me, because what comes next is the best part of all. David's arrest was an earthquake that shook the entire foundation of the Thompson family. When the police knocked on his door the next morning, he tried to flee out the back, but was captured by officers who had anticipated the possibility. In his pocket, they found a cloned bank card with Grandma Dorothy's account details and handwritten notes with the times and locations of withdrawals he still planned to make. Uncle Robert got the call from the police station at 9 in the morning. I know this because Detective Martinez kept me informed of every step of the investigation. "Your uncle is on his way here now," he told me. "Do you want to stay and talk to him when he arrives?" I thought for a moment and decided that yes, I wanted to be there. I wanted to see the face of the man who had unjustly accused me, who had filed a lawsuit against me, who had turned the whole family against me based on evidence he didn't even bother to investigate properly. When Uncle Robert arrived at the station, he was unrecognizable. The confident, authoritarian man who had confronted me months ago now looked 10 years older, with slumped shoulders and a lost look in his eyes. He saw me sitting in the reception area and stopped in his tracks, as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "Sarah, I didn't know," he stammered, approaching slowly. "How could I have known? All the evidence pointed to you." "All the evidence pointed to me, because that's what your son wanted to happen," I replied with a calmness that surprised me. He knew exactly how to frame me. And you, instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt, instead of trusting the person who took care of your mother for years, you chose to condemn me without even considering other possibilities. Uncle Robert sank into a chair beside me, putting his face in his hands. My own son stole from his grandmother and let the blame fall on you." What we found out later was even worse. David wasn't just stealing from Grandma Dorothy. He was running an elaborate card cloning scheme and defrauding several elderly people in the area. Grandma's account was just one of many he had compromised. When the police searched his house, they found card cloning equipment, lists with names and personal information of other victims, and almost $15,000 in cash hidden in a box under his bed. "Your grandmother probably didn't even know she was being robbed," Detective Martinez explained during one of the interrogations. With her advancing dementia, she wasn't keeping a close eye on her bank statements anymore. David took advantage of her condition and the trust she had in him. The worst part was knowing that Grandma Dorothy had spent the last months of her life being deceived by her own grandson, being robbed by someone she trusted completely. The news of the arrest spread through the family like wildfire. One by one, all those who had condemned me began to call, trying to apologize, trying to explain their actions. Jessica was the first. "Sarah, I don't even know what to say. I feel terrible. How could I have believed you were capable of this?" Her voice was choked up. She had clearly been crying. "Can you forgive me?" Amanda, my sister, showed up at my door that same evening. Her eyes were red from crying, and she was holding a bouquet of yellow flowers, Grandma's favorite. "Sarah, I'm the worst sister in the world," she said before I even fully opened the door. "How could I have turned my back on you? How could I believe you would do something like that?" She came in, and we talked late into the night, crying together, her repeatedly asking for forgiveness and me trying to process everything that had happened. But the call that marked me the most was from Uncle Robert himself, 3 days after the arrest. "Sarah, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I need to speak with you in person. There are things you need to know about David, about how we got to this point." I agreed to meet him, not because I had forgiven him, but because I needed to understand how my own family had been capable of treating me that way. The meeting with Uncle Robert took place at the same cafe where Grandma Dorothy used to drink hot chocolate on winter Sundays. He arrived on time, carrying a folder full of documents. "Sarah, this is all the evidence I had against you," he said, pushing the folder toward me. "I want you to see exactly what David did to frame you, so you understand that he didn't just steal money, he destroyed a family." Inside the folder was much more than just bank statements. David had created a fake dossier on me with photos of my routine, schedules of my visits to Grandma, and even recordings of phone conversations where I talked about the family's financial struggles. He had meticulously documented every aspect of my life to build a perfect case against me. It was a betrayal so deep and calculated, it was almost impressive. Why didn't you investigate further before accusing me? I asked, flipping through the false documents my own cousin had created against me. Uncle Robert sighed deeply. Because David came to me first. He came to me with this evidence, crying, saying he'd discovered you were stealing from Grandma, but didn't know how to tell me. He played the role of the concerned grandson to perfection. I also found out that David had used part of the stolen money to pay off drug debts he had hidden from the family for years. He was being threatened by dealers and saw Grandma's account as an easy way to get quick cash. When he realized the withdrawals were being noticed, he devised the plan to blame me, knowing my regular visit routine would make me the perfect suspect. The lawsuit Uncle Robert had filed against me was dropped, of course. More than that, he offered to pay for all the legal costs I had incurred during those terrible months. "It's not enough, I know," he said, "but it's the least I can do after everything you went through because of my family." I accepted the payment, not because the money mattered, but because it was an official acknowledgement of the injustice I had suffered. David was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud, grand theft, and running a criminal enterprise. During the trial, I was present in the gallery, watching the man who had destroyed my life finally be held accountable for his crimes. He didn't look me in the eye once during the entire process. When he was called to make his final statement, he apologized to the family, but never specifically mentioned what he had done to me. The stolen inheritance money was almost fully recovered. The portion David had already spent was offset by the sale of his assets. Each of the 5 grandchildren received their original share of $36,000, exactly as Grandma Dorothy had planned. But for me, that money had a bitter taste. It was impossible to touch it without remembering everything I had been through, how my own family had treated me. I decided to donate my share of the inheritance to a charity that cares for the elderly with dementia, in memory of Grandma Dorothy. It was a way to honor her memory without carrying the weight of everything that had happened. When I told the family this, the reaction was one of surprise and, I believe, additional shame at the contrast between my generosity and the betrayal I had suffered. Today, 2 years after all of this, I can say that I have reconciled with most of my family. Amanda and I are close again, though our relationship will never be exactly the same as before. Jessica and I speak occasionally, but we maintain a respectful distance. Uncle Robert tries to make up for what he did by being overly kind to me, which is sometimes awkward, but I understand it's his way of dealing with the guilt. The biggest lesson I learned from this whole experience is that the people we love the most are capable of both the greatest acts of love and the greatest betrayals. Grandma Dorothy loved me unconditionally her entire life, but David, her own grandson, betrayed her in the cruelest way possible. My family condemned me without hesitation, but they were also able to ask for forgiveness and try to right the wrong when the truth came out. I also learned that the truth has a strength of its own. No matter how much they try to bury it, no matter how convincing the lies built against you are, the truth always finds a way to the surface. Sometimes it takes a while, sometimes it hurts more than we'd like, but it always appears. And when it does, there's no argument in the world that can deny it. If you are going through something similar, if you are being falsely accused or feel that your family has turned its back on you, don't give up. Keep fighting for the truth. Keep believing in your innocence. Keep being the person of integrity you have always been. Because in the end, when all the dust settles, when all the lies are exposed, you'll be able to look in the mirror and know that you stayed true to your values, regardless of what others said about you. And to Grandma Dorothy, wherever she is, I hope she knows that I never stopped loving her, never stopped honoring her memory, and that in the end, justice was done in her name.